Hey guys, welcome back to another video in our electrical training series. In this video, what I'd like to talk about is loads. Now, remember back in that previous video where I talked about all the different parts of a basic circuit? Well, loads were kind of a major part of it because they do all of the work. Now, loads can kind of be a very broad area. There's a lot of things that can be considered a load, but for the reality is it's what's going to do work. So let's kind of consider that as being what is a load. The only other thing is I want to talk about a little bit is resistors. Now, remember in an atom, we have the things that are good conductors. They have 2 electrons in that outer valence shell, and there's things that are considered an insulator, and those are things that are like 6 to 7 electrons in that outer shell or that valence shell. Now, there are things that are in the middle. They're kind of that like 3 to 4 or 5 range or whatever. Those are called semiconductors. Now, a semiconductor can be used to drop voltage down to handle or do some work. Now, let's just talk about this in the form of LEDs. Now, LEDs actually don't need as much power as we have to offer them usually. And if we apply too much power to them, they will blow up. Or they won't blow up, I guess. They will just kind of blow out and they will no longer put off light. So what we will do is we'll add a thing called a resistor. Now, a resistor is going to be drawn like this. The reason I talked about, well, we'll do one more. The reason I talked about the atom structure is because a resistor is that middle range, that 3 to 5 electrons in that outer shell. And that's called a semiconductor. Now, a resistor is measured in a thing called ohms, and ohms are going to be drawn like this. It's going to be the symbol for omega, and we're going to see those all over the place. We're going to see that on our multimeter if we're going to test for resistance. And now resistance is just the resistance to electron flow. So things like this will actually take that resistance and it'll actually burn it up so that we can put that LED somewhere in the circuit. I hope that kind of explains one type of load. We're going to be working with a resistive circuit quite a bit. And you're going to see a lot of resistors, and we're going to give you a ohm rating for that resistor, and we're going to ask you to work out using Ohm's law how many volts or amps are in that circuit. Like I said, we will explain that a little bit more later, but right now we're just talking about loads. But you are going to see some resistors as loads moving forward. So let's go ahead and let's get rid of these and let's talk about things that you might see. So we already talked about the light bulb, or a light. I guess it could be something else, but this would be like an incandescent light, something that just has an actual light bulb. We talked a little bit about LEDs. Remember, LEDs are going to look like this. We're going to go ahead and draw a line, and we're going to go ahead and shade this in, and we're going to have some little arrows right here. Now, you don't know this maybe right now. An LED is actually a diode. And now a diode, we're going to talk about this when we get into our actual circuits, is going to be a one-way check valve, meaning electricity can flow this way, it cannot flow this way. But an LED is one of these diodes, but it emits light. So LED actually stands for light emitting diode. And these arrows right here indicate that it is emitting light. So we're not going to probably work with this too much until we get into our, more of our electronics or circuit boards. But just know a diode is that arrow that points up, or it could point down depending on what direction the electricity is flowing. And if it has the arrows, it is light emitting. So LED, light emitting. All right. So now we've got those ones. Now we also have things like a coil or an electromagnet. So an electromagnet might be something that takes and pops on a relay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. It may be just drawn as a circuit that kind of comes up, and it could be R1 or something like that, and it could be just stand for relay 1 coil. You might see that a few times. You might also see something for like a motor. Motors kind of vary, depends on what you're going to see, but most of the time it's just going to be a circle, and it may have an M drawn in it. It may have lines off to the side. Motors are just kind of awkward. They kind of change what they look like depending on what type of circuit you're working with. For the most part, you're going to see things like coils. you're gonna think things like motors, and you're gonna see things like lights. Especially in this class, you may, when you actually get out and start working in the workplace, see other stuff, but for the most part, we're gonna kind of keep it down to something simple like this. And to be honest, there's not many more things other than this. So I hope this kind of helped you understand what a load is. The only other thing I would talk about a little bit more is every one of these items has a resistance value. So we talked about that resistor and semiconductors. Well, a light is going to burn up energy. So it's resisting the flow of electrons to create that light. The coil in a relay is going to resist the flow of electrons, or it's going to burn up those electrons to go ahead and pull that magnet in. And a motor is going to burn up those electrons to spin that shaft, okay? So just know that every load has a resistance value. It doesn't really matter at this point what those are, and we're going to talk about more about how to find them and how we're going to use that a little bit more later on. I hope that kind of spells out everything that you need to know about loads for right now, and obviously we're going to build on it.